Number 5, Daredevil. Alright, so this video is going to be a bit of a challenge for me, namely in keeping things positive, which I really wanted to do. Daredevil Season 3 was released on Netflix last year and got a lot of positive critical reviews, and a lot of fans were very passionate about how good the season was. Indeed, everything about Season 3 is awesome. It gets all the characters right, and really might be, on the whole, the best live adaptation of Daredevil ever. We don't have big, long, dry spots of boring storyline at any point in this season, which honestly has not happened in any of these Netflix shows so far. And we get a nice, tightly written story about the return of Kingpin and Matt Murdock, and how they come about reconciling with their failures in the past. It's a great season that really left me feeling positive about the character and how Netflix chose to depict him. Collectively, the show is miles ahead of the movie in terms of how they adapt the character and the overall quality of the final product. But Season 3 in particular feels like something special. We go back to the roots of what makes Daredevil Daredevil, not relying on any fancy gimmicks or tricks, or even some huge overarching plotline to the season that is being hammered home every single episode. There is, without a doubt, an overall story arc to this thing, and this show is heavily serialized. I do have to say this show does a really good job at doing serialization right, having a tight overall plotline while each individual episode is in and of itself entertaining. If you're going to approach this type of storytelling, Daredevil at the very least is at its core the type of show that really facilitates that sort of long-form storytelling, and if you're going to do that sort of thing, at least you need to do it right, which is exactly what the showrunners, writers, and crew of Daredevil did very well throughout this. They managed to avoid a lot of the tropes of these Netflix shows so far in Season 3, keeping things interesting and visually striking. And the writing is tight enough that across all the episodes, each one has good storytelling to it and doesn't drag out at any given point, like a lot of other seasons of Daredevil or some of the other Netflix Marvel shows did during their run. All things considered, it is pretty nice that this series got to go out on a high note, basically soaring higher than they ever did before. But that's where I find the challenge of keeping this video positive really comes into play. Because Daredevil, after a season that did everything right, with a great cast and crew behind it, and a good amount of critical and fan support, was rewarded for their excellent efforts by having their show cancelled. And this wasn't the intent of the series. I remember seeing on Twitter the writers eagerly pitching Season 4 of Daredevil for Netflix, and clearly the company was considering renewing the show. But I have to say, the cancellation isn't very surprising. Not only did a lot of other shows this year from Netflix and Marvel's partnership collapse, but Daredevil simply didn't have the attention it once did. While it did earn a lot of critical praise and praise of people who were definitely going to be watching that show already, I found personally, in my experience, and I'm sure this is reflective of the larger world in general, people who aren't die-hard Daredevil fans and aren't critics didn't really watch this show. It didn't really make waves the way that Seasons 1 and 2 of Daredevil did, and I found nobody was really talking about this show the way they were about other shows. I find it a very telling fact that I've had more conversations with people about Gotham, which didn't get any votes in any direction this year, compared to Daredevil, which I think outside of the internet, I don't know a single person who's actually seen Season 3 of that show. Which is a real shame because honestly, Season 3 is the best season of this show yet. It nicely keeps the character dark without becoming miserable and does some really tight writing overall. Every single character feels on point and is really well done in this season. And yeah, when we consider how the partnership between Netflix and Disney kind of collapsed, and now Disney is trying to start their own digital streaming option, which really feels like they're just encroaching on more and more of the media sphere, now basically trying to take over a major avenue of distribution, perhaps the avenue of distribution in the future, that will take over even box office receipts. And I'm frustrated that all these shows fell apart, and aside from Daredevil, none of them really did a good job with their characters in 2018. I'm frustrated that there was never really a plan in place for the Defenders beyond just doing one miniseries, and the miniseries itself didn't end up being all that great to begin with. I'm frustrated that where the whole Marvel Netflix experiment is basically coming to an end, with the only hope left having been The Punisher, and based on how the premiere of Season 2's Punisher went, it's not going to have any chances for a future either, nor does it really deserve it. I'm frustrated at all this excellent opportunity squandered with near perfect casting of Daredevil, Foggy Nelson, and Karen Page, kind of feeling like it's going to the wayside here, after their characters were so good in Season 3. This isn't even the last depiction of Karen Page either, and her character was unfortunately brought back for Season 2 of The Punisher, where the character essentially had nothing to do. It's not easy talking about any of this stuff, even a show and how great it is, without talking about the larger context of the network and its situation, because the fact that it was cancelled feels very relevant, even in the voting process of this series. Daredevil got a ton of votes for being one of the best of stories of 2018, but it also got a couple of votes for the worst of. And the people who made those votes were very clear. It wasn't because Daredevil was a bad show last year. It was good, and even the people voting for it as one of the worst said as much. But the reason they were voting for it as one of the worst is that they were frustrated, and they said as much, over its cancellation and the ongoing politics between Marvel and Netflix. And that's all a real shame, because Daredevil Season 3 is honestly not only the best Netflix season of a Marvel show yet, but the best example of the MCU being adapted into television across any network. It did everything right, and it just feels so wrong that it was ultimately cancelled for it, when other, lesser shows are being renewed. That is the nature of television, and it's never going to be perfect or absolutely just, but it does feel significantly disappointing in a major way. Anyhow, my heart can only take so much when talking about this show. It was absolutely one of the best things to come out in 2018, yet I still feel very frustrated and bummed out every time I think about it or watch this show, just because of what happened to this character and what went down with Netflix. 3 seasons of any show isn't a terrible run, and we shouldn't complain too much about not getting enough Daredevil. But it just feels like this is it for the character for a long time, and it was just finding its stride as a show. I don't have any doubts that Season 4 would have been pretty awesome, and I'm pretty sour that we don't get to see that anytime soon. Let alone how I feel about the ongoing nature of all these other Netflix shows. Luckily, we aren't actually done talking about them yet, and they will show up again one more time at some point in the best or worst of 2018 list. So stay tuned for that, because I have a little more to say on all of this going forward. But next up is another comic book series as we get deeper into the worst of 2018 list, as decided by our viewers. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments section below, and you can also find our Patreon page in the video description. Patrons get exclusive access to certain perks, and we're influential in making this mini-series a thing. So thanks again, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.